Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'd like to call this Finance Committee meeting of the Frederick County Public Schools to order. It is now 4:35 p.m. on June the 10th. So it looks like we have an agenda before us. How would the board like to proceed?
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second? And all in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion is so moved, so approved. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Hummer to lead us through the meeting.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. So we have 3 items before you this evening. One of them is to go to the full board for approval. First is we're going to discuss our internal audit results. Mrs. Camry will dive into that here in a second. We also wanted to provide you all, as well as the public, with the construction bond process, with hopes that we will move forward with some of our CIP projects for now as well as in the future. We wanted to be able to provide you all with an opportunity to see that process and, of course, answer any questions you might have as we continue to navigate and work through that process. And as you mentioned, Madam Chair, we do have some amazing guests here in the audience, so thank you all so much for being here, in case you all have some additional questions about the additional at-risk dollars that we received from the state, and that is the item that is we're recommending to go to the full board for approval, is how to spend those dollars, as well as recommending giving some of those dollars back to the county as well. So with that, I'll hand over to Mrs. Camry, and we will go from there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Hummer, Madam Chair, members of the board. So let's talk about the internal audit that we have and been having for the last 25, 26 years. So this audit is performed by Brown Edwards. They also do our Student Activity Fund audit as well as our internal audit. They are hired and paid by Frederick County government. So they hire them, they go out for the RFP, and they pay for their services. So when they come and audit us, they also audit the county as well during that same timeline. They come in twice a year. What we're going to talk about today is that period from September 1st to February 29th that they audited. The areas that they test are, of course, the accounts payable, payroll, general ledger, accounts receivable, and what they added 3 years ago, computer inventory for both employees and students. If there is a finding that is noted, that means it's something that is contrary to what our policy states, then that we have to show a corrective action in order to correct so it doesn't happen again. So from the financial piece, there were no findings from finance. However, there were 2 for IT. Now, IT's only been doing this for 3 years. Their first year, of course, was the beginning, so they're trying to learn that process. The second year they were audited. The second time they had no findings, and then we have some findings this time. What's kind of important to note here is that they also had some turnover in staff, so it's probably a new person coming in and trying to learn how this audit is performed. What we also have to keep in mind is that when they do come in and audit us, they're looking at over almost 20,000 different Chromebooks, computers, desktops. So the first finding is for the employee side. They found 12 instances. We have 2,300 people, 12 instances where an employee had 1 or more pieces of equipment incorrectly assigned to them. And then for our students, which we have over 14,000, there were 7 instances where there were more than 1 assigned to a student. So these don't cause us concern because they're very small, but I also know that they are taking corrective action to make sure that they can eliminate these the next time.
Madam Chairwoman, of course I have a question. Does this include the air-gapped computer that Dr. Angelo is not? No, I'm kidding.
I think he's one of the 12.
One of the 12.
Is he? I was curious as to what kinds of equipment that were incorrectly assigned. Is that information that you can present to us now?
Not now, but I can get you the write-up because this is the finding itself, and I can give you an example of what it could have been.
Sure.
It could have been that a student had a Chromebook that broke, and they threw it away or trashed or repurposed it.
I see.
And then they reassigned another one, but they never took the original one off from that student.
I got you.
So it can be things like that.
And so would there be charges for that student to repay for that Chromebook?
We usually do not charge unless it's intentional.
I see. Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. So that's all about the audit. Unless there's questions, then I'll move on to the VPSA or borrowing for construction. Okay, so to give you a little bit of an overview, local school divisions, you are empowered and you're responsible for controlling, erecting, furnishing, equipping, and maintaining school buildings. School divisions in Virginia do not have the ability to taxing power, so therefore, any debt is really the county's debt, because we do not have the taxing authority to go out to bond. And VPSA, Virginia Public School Authority, their bonds, it's intentional to help school divisions finance projects at low cost. So VPSA was established in 1962 by the Virginia General Assembly to give us that low-cost financing. They have a AA plus or above rating, which is how they get their lower interest rates. They go out twice for bond, either fall or spring. We are level funded on principal. It's usually over 20 years. They are staffed by Department of Treasury, and they continuously look for refunding opportunities, meaning that the interest rates drop enough on some of our bonds that they will then go refinance them basically, and then we get a credit for that interest. So they're always looking for that opportunity. Okay? So that's how they're different from a bank. So what they do is they're always monitoring to see if they can save us money, which is great. They always look at the pools, what we're paying, what those rates they can refinance them for to get us those savings. They're always doing that. If it's a favorable deal, they'll refinance it. And also they pass any savings to us as a credit. So the most recent was this year. They just did refinance the 2014 fall bond. They usually cannot. I think the rule is it has to be out there for at least 10 years before they can refinance.
Oh,
So this is a 2014. It's been 10 years. So they looked. They found a more favorable rate. So then they went out to refund. We have to apply for that refund, which we did, and that's going to save us close to $280,000 in interest for the next 10 years. Okay.
fantastic.
So we wanted to kind of share a construction project overview to kind of just give you kind of the process. But remember, what I'm going to show you is the perfect world, because there's a lot of things that go into approving a construction project. So the first step is for you as a board to approve that project and the cost, and that's how it gets on the CIP. And once you decide that, yes, it's time, we want to go out for this project and get our funding, you then create a resolution after you vote. And that resolution goes downtown stating what the project is, what the cost is. And then we're also asking them to approve us to go to VPSA for that bonding. So then when the county does that, they're saying, we're going to do some general obligation bonds, school bonds, so that you can go and borrow for VPSA. So once you do that, when it goes to the county, then it's in their hands. Because of the large dollar amount, they have to go to public hearing for it. So they'll set that public hearing. So let's say we send it down. They do a public hearing. They have to advertise it for 10 days in the paper so they can get stakeholder comments. In the past, doesn't mean they have to, when they've had a public hearing, they usually vote the same day, but they don't have to. They can do it at the next meeting if they so choose. So we will say that they did the public hearing, they've approved it, and now they're happy with what we're doing, we're all together. So then they would create the resolution authorizing us and giving us approval to have an appropriation for a project, what that project is, and to go to VPSA for that bonding. So then that puts it in our hands to then start taking this moving forward. And then we would start working with how much do we need to start borrowing for the first piece. Because as you see at the bottom, an elementary school is about 4 different VPSA borrowing. Mm-hmm. A high school is anywhere from 6 to 7. A middle school is somewhere in between. Okay? We get it all up front, so we're not going back each time we need to do a borrowing. That's why we want them to appropriate the full value.
Madam Chairwoman, just for our audience and sanity's sake, we're at number 3 right now. Is that correct? We're
We
still
haven't
in-
even,
We're at number 1.
We're at number 1. Okay. So we've approved it, so it's now in the Board of Supervisors' hands, correct?
We haven't yet. We haven't yet approved it.
Oh, I thought it was approved.
So great question. We approved, no, this is a great question. We approved the CEP projects to go downtown in December.
CIP.
CIP, what did I say?
CEP.
That's CIP, sorry, we were,
That's okay.
say CIP. So now, what we need to do is we need to send downtown, which is a separate request, which is the request for the appropriation of dollars.
Okay.
So when that happens, then we will see if they will actually appropriate the funds that we need for these three
Gotcha.
projects, which we're waiting for a joint meeting so that we can talk through the fourth high school, and then we would then vote to ask for the appropriation of dollars.
Thank you. My apologies for my ignorance.
No, it's confusing. We were hoping to have that joint meeting around the June 17th timeframe, but that has not come to fruition. So the goal, I know initially, was for us to vote on number 1 on June 25th. But
Yeah.
we're not going to be able to do that because we haven't heard from
Right.
the BOS when they want to have that work session. So we're waiting.
Yep. Where's the COP?
Let's see.
I don't see him anywhere. The police officer resource, sorry, it was a bad joke.
I was going to say, I know
Squirrel.
he's joking, so I'm going to go on to the next slide. So here is the bonding of what we do from the school division side, that once that project has been approved, then it's back in our hands to start the process. And so we want to walk you through that timeline of what it looks like. So we've got a project that's been approved. So now we start working with Mr. Kinney, the supervisor of construction, and say, how much do you think you're going to spend for 6 months? Because the borrowing is every 6 months. We don't want to borrow $152 million for Fourth High School up front because we're paying interest for 4 years until it actually gets built. So we're trying to be very strategic in how much do we need for 6 months. So we do it in 6-month increments. And we want to make sure we don't run out of money in that 6-month increments.
But to be fair, Madam Chairwoman, I'm sorry, to be fair, the $152 million is kind of an old figure. I mean, how old is that figure?
That's just been reworked. It's going to be less.
Yeah.
It is?
I'm just using it as an example.
Okay,
So
I'm sorry,
sorry.
I just,
Yeah.
From last week.
okay,
I'll use 180 million.
I don't care.
So then we determine what that 6 months borrowing looks like, okay? Then we submit an application to VPSA to say, here's the project, here's how much, and then we have to have that resolution from downtown giving us authority, so VPSA will look at that and say we have a complete package. And they'll look at that and approve it. Now, there's a lot of steps in between, but we're trying to make it a little simplistic, so, because it can get very involved.
Sure.
But let's say they move it on, so our application is approved. This is what the application when the final project looks like. Yes, so this is the whole piece of information, but now we get it in disk instead of hard copy. This is from 2014 when they were still printing them and sending them to us. This requires a lot of signatures from downtown, meaning their treasurer, their county administrator, and their chair of the board. And here, I think our chair, Dr. Hummer, and myself sign off on some of this application. So it is very detailed oriented. So then once we have that money, those monies are deposited into what's called a SNAP account. And that SNAP account stands for State Non-Arbitrage Program. We're going to talk about what that means in just a little bit. But what SNAP really does is they take that money, they're in custody of it. So we don't get, whatever we borrow does not come directly to us as a school division. It is put in this account. They oversee the custodial piece of that. They invest it, so we earn interest as well while it sits there, and then they disperse the money once we have spent the money. And we'll talk about that in just a minute as well. Then over in Mr. Kinney's office, he has a bookkeeper, and as these bills are coming in, she's putting them into the accounts payable module so we can pay our vendors. So we're paying them, right? Then as we see that we've paid them, then we in finance then submit to SNAP a reimbursement so we can get our money back. But it goes back to the county because they fronted us this money, basically, because it's all sitting, it's their debt. So then that money goes back to them. During this time, we are reconciling in finance how much we spent, how much borrowing we have out. We're following that process to make sure we don't go over appropriation. We make sure we don't go into arbitrage, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. And then we're also paying the debt service payment, principal and interest, as it comes through. If you remember, during the budget process, Dr. Hummer comes forward with operating fund, capital projects fund, and debt service fund. How much do we need for debt service? How much more do we need or less? If it's less, the county takes that money. If it's more, then they add to it. Okay? So here's the last several years of some bond yield rates. And you will see this is a level funded principal, but for the last, since 2021 to 2023, you can see what that bond yield is. Notice in 21, that was right outside of COVID when money was very cheap. And it was when we borrowed we started with Jameswood High School and Indian Hollow. So we got some borrowings at a very low interest rate. And now that you see homeowners are paying 7, we're still only paying 4 to do school construction. So what is arbitrage? Arbitrage, and we talk about that so we don't hit arbitrage, is mean we can't earn interest income more than what we're paying interest in. So that's really what arbitrage, we always have to follow this because we cannot make money off of our bond money that we're borrowing. So here's a borrowing that you can see for the Jameswood High School project. And if you look in the red, you see the arbitrage calendar. That's what we have to follow. So on May 9th of 2024, we had to have spent 10% of that bond not to hit arbitrage. And that's a 6-month spending benchmark. And if you look over under total reimbursement requests at the top there and come all the way down to the bottom, you'll see $9 million. We met that because we spent $9 million and only had to spend $2 million. So therefore, we know we're safe in finance because that was as of May 10th. So we were good, well within arbitrage for 6-month as well as the 12-month benchmark. If you look at the top as well on this sheet, you'll see the bond that we borrowed here. We were going out for about $20 million. We borrowed, the bond proceeds were at 18.9. We got a premium of almost 1.2 million, meaning we do not pay the premium back. That's free money basically for us. And then the cost to go out to bond. This sheet shows the Jameswood High School project as a total. So if you look at the top, you'll see all the different borrowings we've done. What you'll also see is there may be a transfer from an old project that closed out in which we saved money, meaning it came in on time and it came in under budget. So therefore, we transfer those funds to a new project, so we're borrowing less money, meaning we're saving taxpayer dollars because we're not borrowing as much. We can't go over appropriation. That's always going to be what blocks us, but we're borrowing less because we got to transfer it from a closed-out project in which we saved money. So you see that piece here, and then you'll see that we always follow these to make sure we never go over appropriation, which is what this form is for. We track every time we spend money, where we spend it, what project, and we make sure we tie back to appropriation, that we never go over appropriation. What's difficult sometimes is because we may have several bonds out there, we always have to look where do we need to spend it from so we don't hit arbitrage. So we're always looking at that, and we're always looking to make sure we don't overspend. And on the last bond we go out for, we have to be careful because we're earning interest and we don't know what that will be. So we have to make sure we come as close to that last number that keeps us at basically appropriation without going over with interest income, which is a juggling act. But we've done it pretty well, if I should say so myself.
If we go over on with arbitrage, you said, what's the penalties if we go over?
It's usually the difference between what you earn and what you paid.
And that goes to?
The state. We pay it back, basically. We have not hit arbitrage in many years. I mean, we do a pretty good job of watching that.
And one more question, if I may. You mentioned that sometimes we have a shortage and we send that into the bond. Is that something that's the norm for us? Or where we've not used all the dollars?
Oh, yeah, when we usually have more money than we need in a project, meaning that we've saved money in that project, we transfer it to an existing project.
I guess I'm asking, is that something that we usually end up doing? I mean, it's the norm for us?
Oh, yeah, and a lot of school divisions do that, yes.
Thank you.
And here we wanted to give you an example. So here's Robert E. Ayler Middle School. And you can see, so this project's already closed out. The appropriation was $48.7 million. Of all the bonds, we went out to bond for 4 or 5 different issues. We only really borrowed 41.6, almost 41.7. Premiums were received 4.5. We earned in SNAP account $337,000 in interest, and we transferred from Jordan Springs, where we saved some money, into this account of $1.3 million. So that project, what we spent was 47.9. What our debt service really is on that project is 41.6. So you can see the money that's saved. Where this comes into play is when we hear that the county is doing a debt, looking at percentages to stay within, is we never borrow the full amount of what they're projecting because we usually get premiums on our bond. But there's no way for them to know or for us to know until the end of the project. So if they were to do this, go back and say, oh, how much would we needed our tax rate to be, they would have really only used the 41.6 to determine that, even though when they did the projection, they would have used 48.7. And that's just how it is. Nothing against them, it's just because we don't know it until the end.
Of course.
So with that being said, I'll pause and see if there's any more questions about EPSA borrowing construction. Okay. So the state did us a nice favor and finally landed the budget after we already approved your budget. And so they've given us an extra $2.1 million. However, all those funds are restricted for at-risk only programs. So here's a slide that shows you what those at-risk programs are. So here's the 2.1 has to be spent within these categories. And I'm not going to read them to you because you've seen these in other finance meetings. But this is what then drives us to say, how are we going to spend this 2.1?
Take it out.
So there was a part of me is like, okay, that's not the Perry Weather, that's some, okay. So anyway, everybody hide. So here's some, Dr. Hummer, if you want to spend the full 2.1, this would be Dr. Hummer's recommendation of how to spend that. And we do have the experts behind me who can tell you more about what these jobs do if you have those questions. But he would be recommending 17 special ed department chairs, 1 for each middle and high school, and 10 at the elementary level for those learning centers. Those would be 12-month positions. 4 accountability specialists, and these are 11-month positions for the middle school. 1 English language learner teacher, and 1 parent liaison for Sharando. When you notice these salaries, know that these are not the straight salaries. These are always going to be salary and benefits.
Right.
30% or more is benefit piece of these numbers. So when you see this, don't think a parent liaison's making $68,000. That has their benefits in there. And we will always show salary and benefits anytime we bring something forward.
Madam Chair. Thank you, Mrs. Camry. If we can go ahead and just kind of describe each of these positions to make sure that it's fully clear for everybody in regards to what these positions will do for our buildings, and then give an opportunity for our principals and staff to answer any questions you might have. So one of the areas that we really need to focus on and work on here in Frederick County is our students with disabilities. They are underperforming. There are some structures that we need in place. And one of the areas that we have heard from our principals loud and clear is a lot of those responsibilities of going to IEP meetings and running all of these things falls on the administrators, which they have a lot of other things to do on a day-to-day. Not saying that special education is not important. It is so important that somebody needs to be dedicated to do that. So we want to get to a point where we get to 1 special education department chair per building. This would be a good way to get us closer to that, and you'll see on the next slide what I am going to propose. But we definitely want to make sure that we are focusing on that area. So not only will they have a dedicated professional and expert in their building, but we will also provide dedicated training to those designees once a month. And then they will essentially be running the meetings, they will be helping with case management, they'll be helping with training, and everything will be flooded through them. The other piece is the accountability specialist. And right now, we have 3 accountability specialists at each of our high schools because of the level of testing that they have at the high school level. Well, we also have a lot of testing at the middle school level. There's a significant amount of testing that falls to our counselors and other staff that have other roles and responsibilities, where that's where we believe this accountability specialist is listed on the at-risk list, because it will help eliminate that responsibility on those professionals that could be helping with our at-risk students, such as our counselors. And then I know you guys assign them to other staff, so if you have questions, they're more than happy to answer that. And then we also have Ms. Headley here because we are seeing an increase in our student population for English language learners, and we are at we are 1 teacher short in regards to that compliance, so we definitely want to add that teacher on. And then adding another parent liaison, which is a position that helps support our English language learner population and helps bridge that relationship. If you look at our staffing standards, we definitely are going to in need of those. As we move forward, this would get us to where we would like to go with that ratio, which we've established through the staffing standards. So with all that being said, and then I want to see if you have any questions for our amazing professionals that are here. If you can go to the next slide, Mrs. Camry. So what my proposal is that we start with 10 special education department chairs. We start at 1 at each secondary school, and then we add 3 at the elementary level for schools that have a high number of students, as well as having a learning center in their school. We add that one new English language learner teacher because that is compliance. We want to make sure that we meet that ratio, and then we can also share, answer any questions there, as well as adding those 4 new accountability specialists to really, again, help free up those counselors and other staff that are taking on that responsibility, as well as other defined roles that they could do to help the middle schools. And then what we were able to do, Madam Chair, is with that 2.1 million, we were able to find current at-risk dollars in the original budget proposal. So with that, we found $720,000 in that current budget that we could say, county, we are giving that money back to you, and we're going to use state dollars to purchase those items within our budget. Meaning, we have $720,000 that we could either, one, which I'm recommending, give back to the county, or two, we can request to use for other things, such as capital projects, or I know this did come up from another board member, 2 other board members, about looking at increasing the attendance bonus for bus drivers from 130 to 150, which would be about $34,000. Or if we wanted to add on, again, additional special ed department chairs, adding on that parent liaison, we can use that money towards those positions or to other items. So with that, I want to open up to questions. Also want to give our principals and our staff the opportunity to either present or answer any questions you guys might have, and then we can go from there. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Excellent. I do have some questions. So with the one position here that gives me pause, and it gives me pause because it has to do with testing, and I will speak very candidly, I'm so tired of our kids being tested out the yin-yang. But yet I know it's a requirement, and I wish that from this dais we could just eliminate all the testing and turn you guys loose to teach and actually teach our kids and focus on that time to teach our children instead of testing them. So to make sure that I fully understand what an accountability specialist is, these individuals are the test proctors, they do the paperwork. Like, can you give me a little more color as to what that position entails?
Is anybody interested in coming up, or all 3 of you?
Oh, all 3 of
guys.
us.
Right, yeah.
Look at
There's
this.
only 2 of us. We better watch it.
So
Thank
I think that the big thing with the accountability
Could you
specialist.
go into the microphone?
Not only do they, they're the organizer of all things testing. So they start with the calendar. They then make that work within the school calendar that we have. They then find all of the folks and train them who are going to provide the testing. They're in charge of all the materials. That's the inventorying of them, the dispensing of them, the collecting of them, and the returning of them. They're also in charge of scheduling all of the students and scheduling all the proctors and doing all the training. But that involves organizing all of the rooms. That involves the delayed bell schedules. That involves the collection of materials, the dispensing of materials, the recollection of materials, and the housing of the materials. And the accountability is high stakes at that point. But on top of that, then if you think about, that's just one day.
Right.
What about all the kids who weren't there? Then we do this all again to capture all of the kids who were absent to make sure that we are accountable, right, for all the kids who need to be tested. I think the accountability specialist also not only does the incremental testing the 3 times a year, but we're looking at the SOL testing 1 time a year. We're looking at the stamp testing that it ties into our L students. We're looking at the WIDA testing. We're also looking at all the other intervention testing that's going to happen through our unique schedules in each of our buildings as well. And we envision this individual helping really, I think, make changes for our students, not only with differing abilities, but also for our English language learners. So they're going to be, I think, working side by side with our intervention teacher as well.
So the intervention, just make sure I understand that as well. The intervention testing is when you have a student that you notice is kind of falling behind in some
Yes.
area. The intervention, then they come in and assess that student.
They can help with the assessment or to determine the assessment that's needed and work with a staff member. So like a reading specialist or a specialized reading specialist, they would work hand in hand to make sure that we're testing them appropriately as well. So truly, it is, unfortunately, right to your point, we do a lot, more testing, I think, than people imagine in the middle school. And it truly begins from the month of August when we run all the way till May, beginning of June.
Well, that's the iReady in August, isn't it?
It is. So we start with all of the reading and then math testing that begins in August.
So the credentialing of this person would be similar to you all up here at full teaching credentials, or how what is the requirement for this
I would
position?
recommend that, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because the other piece too, with all of these things that they mentioned, this will also be an extension of the administrators as well. So if they can step in to help with some administrative type responsibilities, we want them to be able to do that again, to not only remove that responsibility from another employee, but also free them up so that they are able to be what they're designed to be, which is the instructional leaders of their building.
And that kind of leads into my next question is, I know we're doing testing year round, but there will be big pushes of testing where this is their full-time position and full-time job, and then there will be times where they're not doing any kind of testing. So when, in those downtimes, they will be helping you all out with your duties, right?
That is absolutely correct, yes.
Okay.
But please.
Well, I think one of the big things there, though, is that they will help to disaggregate that data and then work closely with the intervention resource teacher. So they're looking at the data with the IRT to determine what interventions are needed and are necessary. And then the IRT is the one who's then working with teachers and working with students to implement those interventions.
Gotcha. Okay.
Sometimes that's the component that can get dropped a little bit because you spend so much time inputting the information into Pearson, making sure that all the things that Tara was saying, that, all of the materials that need to be cataloged and then distributed to students and then collected and then returned multiple times a year. And the data input in and of itself, determining what accommodations students need for testing takes hours. So front loading that one day and then all of the makeup days takes hours to do just for inputting, let's say, accommodations for students with disabilities or for ELs, and then making sure that they have the appropriate equipment that they need, dictionaries, et cetera. So then the aftermath of that sometimes is that they have to get back to what their actual job is, whether it's being the instructional technology coach or the school counselor, or assistant principal. And so you lose that person for a time, and then they're like, okay, I've got to get back to what I'm supposed to do here. And so that component of the data disaggregation falls squarely on back on administration or back on the IRT, and it's a lot to go through. So they can help tremendously with making that process a lot more streamlined so that we can provide these interventions for students and help them to move more quickly to the next level.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. That helps tremendously. Thank you.
I have a couple of follow-up questions. So with the new accountability specialist, and this may be for Dr. Hummer, is this to be in line with the state redoing the English SOLs? Like the state's redoing the English standards of learning.
Yeah, they're doing quite a few right now. They're doing math, they're doing history. I mean, there's.
Oh, they're not doing history yet. They're
Yeah,
going to
but
do.
they're looking into.
Oh, I know,
Yeah.
but that English is what they're focusing on right now. I know there's
Correct.
a meeting coming up at some point in one of the colleges. I can't remember. No, what I was wondering is, you talk a lot about the testing and all, and this person would also be, would they be involved in the remediation, or the curriculum involved with the remediation of these students, like developing the curriculum to help them pass the next test or do better in the next test? Is that something that you anticipate?
I mean, maybe, but
I would think that they'd be more involved in maybe organizing the support for students.
But not-
So we have the all-in funding, and so the kids are getting support all through the day, and then they're staying after. There's a lot of organization, communication with transportation, communication with families. This person isn't a Superman, right? So they're not going
No.
to be able to do all of these things that we're describing, but they're going to have a hand in all of these things that we're talking about.
I see.
But they would not be implementing the support for the students, no.
But they
Okay.
would provide the information needed for that remediation, which is
Yeah, I guess I'm
huge.
just wondering if there's, what the job description would look like really for this person is what I'm trying to get at, I guess.
Yeah, so what we want to do, number one, is to make sure that we are truly utilizing the time of our administrators and our counselors and others that we assign this duty to, that they are able to do what they're designed to do according to their job description.
Sure.
So that's number one. Number two, to Madam Chair's point and to what you're leading to, is they're not going to be testing 100% of the time of the year. It's going to be a majority, and there's going to be a lot of things that they're going to be doing, but that is where we can build out that job description with the feedback from the administrators
Gotcha.
on those additional things that they will be doing, because again, a majority of their time is going to be managing all the assessment and testing, which is going to be a lot,
Sure.
but there will be some additional things that we can add into that from feedback from our administrators.
Yeah, I would love to see what the description looks
Absolutely.
like.
Yeah, we can build that out and share with you if you all willing of the board approve this. Yeah, absolutely.
And just to keep in mind, we do have the position at the high schools already. So these positions exist at the high school level.
Right, but it would look a little bit different.
A
at
little
the-
bit different
at
because
the middle
because
school level.
Middle school, they test 3 times a year in English and math.
Correct.
Whereas they do not at the high school level.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And again, excuse my, so they always yell at me. Excuse my naivete on some of these things. The special education department chair, some of the things that I've been hearing from some of the people that I've been talked to, some of the special ed teachers have said they've never hear anything unless it's what they've done wrong. They're not getting a lot of positive feedback. And some of the other things I've heard is a lot of them are spending a lot of time on the paperwork, the IEPs, all those things, and not enough time with the students. So this special education department chair, what is their role? Are they able to help out with that, or how does that work?
I'd like to think that they could, especially, not just going to the meetings and attending the meetings and running the meetings, but also when you have a student with an IEP who's struggling, it's the case manager's job to create like a staffing period where you problem solve and try to help. And they have to often do that by themselves, but I think this person could certainly step in and take on that role so that person could get the information from them and then implement it and be less of the organizer of all of that, which would help them greatly and give them a lot of time back.
I think it's twofold. I think they could help with the training that we need to help our special education teachers learn processes, structures, right? And to improve the writing process and make it more efficient. So I see them as being the trainer, but also the coach for our special education teachers. And that's with data collection, that's with the meetings, that's with the IEP collection. And we're missing that piece right now because typically assistant principals serve in that role. So you're being the special ed designee the full school year, and you're trying to be an assistant principal at the middle school level and run a grade level, and it's really tough, I think, to do the quality coaching and to do the training that's necessary for our special educators.
And
So
to
if
be,
I'm understanding you, these people will be able to fulfill that role and piece that's missing now.
yeah, I've filled both of the roles that we're speaking at when I was an AP, in addition to everything else I had. I did both of those. And they were nice. I was at work till 8 o'clock or come in on a Sunday.
Oh, move
Yes.
over
Of
to the
course.
microphone, Miss Hickey, if you
Sorry.
don't mind.
I was just saying, there were times when I was an AP at James Wood Middle, I did all of that, what you're talking about, the accountability specialist and the department chair, and I still had my grade level, master schedule, instructional leader, so it was overwhelming at times, I'm not gonna lie, it was a lot.
Of course.
So I feel like it would give back, time to the AP to focus on what
No
they
argument
should be
here.
as an instructional leader.
And I think something that we see when you try to piecemeal it out to, this AP is going to take their grade level of IEP meetings or triennials or eligibility meetings, is that you start to lose the consistency and the quality. And so making sure that, you have one person who's in charge and is streamlining that process and streamlining the communication and the message for the entire department as well as your school community.
Well, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I can say with certainty, having worked for you and with you last year, the amount of work that you and the other assistant principals, as well as the other folks that were involved with the testing, as well as all of the other pieces that go with it, led you to not have the necessary time to do your assistant principal duties in the way that I would imagine you would have wanted to do them. As far as, all of those things. So I think personally, the special ed department chairs is an incredibly great idea. So.
Any other
If I could
questions?
just add one quick comment, because I don't want it to sound like we're doing all of this to take things off of the administrators. I mean, that certainly is a good byproduct, but we have nobody in our buildings whose sole focus is special education. Nobody. And so this will be the person whose sole focus is on the Department of Special Education by building,
needs and-
which, to Mr. Sturdivant's point, will directly support the special education teachers who can help support the students with disabilities. And I think it's just a really critical piece that I mean, I had a special ed degree as an assistant principal and a principal, and I still couldn't directly support special education teachers because there's no time. This person will provide that level of support that will ultimately end up helping our kids. And that, to me, is the biggest benefit of it.
For sure.
Yeah, agreed. And also, too, special ed is one of those where parents and students don't have an alternative. Like Frederick County Public Schools, this is their only alternative. There are no private schools that support special education unless they are super specialized and they're not in this region. Like, this is something that is absolutely needed because we cannot let these kids get lost. So I support this wholeheartedly. Yeah.
Would you like us to ask you a question about ESL so you don't feel lonely over there?
Also about the parent liaison, because I understand that got, should I come up here?
Oh, please.
I have to talk
Thank you.
into that, you have to as well.
I promise not to sing.
And I thank you for bringing that up. I do have a question about the parent liaison,
Yes,
too.
absolutely.
So it's my understanding, just with the brief mind meld I had with Dr. Hummer before this meeting, that a parent liaison is essentially a fluent, I'm going to assume Spanish?
Yes.
Speaking
But
employee.
that person is also responsible for communicating with any family,
Okay.
including, so if we have a family that speaks another language, we have a refugee from Afghanistan, how do we communicate with that person? So the parent liaison becomes very attuned with the skills we have and the community members we have.
Okay, I see.
and
So they
right
help
now-
facilitate the resources to
Yes.
bring those individuals into the schools and help them
Yes.
thrive. Okay.
And at present, Millbrook has been operating with two. They have roughly 200 language learners, and they have 2 parent liaisons. Sharando has none, and they have over 100 language learners. That's my concern. And they're growing. When I did the projected numbers, their numbers were much higher than I had expected.
What about James Wood?
James Wood, they doubled from about 25 to 50.
Okay.
But they're also their language, my staff member there that provides language support also helps with the family.
I
She
see.
happens to be a fluent speaker and can help, but we still need help with things like IEP meetings. Or
Sure.
if we want to communicate the culture of our schools, we need to be able to do that succinctly and clearly with families. And liaisons are critical for that.
That was my.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Actually, one other question, just to
Yes.
credentialing, are they credentialed as a teacher as well, or no? Okay.
No, they don't have to.
Okay, excellent. I'm looking forward to seeing the job descriptions of all of these. Like, I really think the parent liaison needs to be drawn. Well, that one is clearly already exists, so I'd like
Correct.
to see that.
Share that, yeah.
But the accountability specialist, I definitely want to see a very comprehensive job description.
Yes.
Because it appears to be a very broad position, but it's very, very specialized. So I want to make sure that's clear to
And Madam
the
Chair, the
public.
department chair as well, because that'll be a new one, and we're
Yes.
more than happy to
Yes.
share that.
Excellent,
Absolutely.
thank you.
So I actually do have a question for you. So with the parent liaison, what is the minimum education that they have to have? Is it a 4-year degree? Is it a high school diploma?
I'm not sure here in Frederick County, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's not a 4-year degree.
Right.
No.
Okay. And I'm wondering just, Spanish, like English, like any other language, has different dialects.
Right.
You've got, Central American dialect, you've got Puerto Rican dialect, you've got Spain dialect, you've got South American dialect, so on and so forth. And do you go that deeply into it to determine what the largest number of dialects we have to attach to that teacher, or that teacher be attached to those students?
That's a great question. I wasn't here with the hiring of the other positions.
I have a parent liaison in my school. I have Miss Viviana Dotson at James Wood Middle School because our largest feed is Millbrook High School. So Viviana, it speaks one dialect of Spanish, but it actually, believe it or not, works very well. She's able to initially communicate with most of our Spanish-speaking families, and it isn't a barrier.
Good.
They find a common ground, and I can tell you fully that having a parent liaison not only supports students' IEP meetings, it's 504 meetings, it's eligibility meetings, it's calls home for good news, it's calls home for concerns, it's calls home, it truly truly is an incredible bridge for communication with families that you're not able to communicate with if you don't have a parent liaison. I know I currently share mine with other surrounding schools, like a James Wood High School, for instance, or other schools that don't have the population that James Wood Middle School has, and it's an incredible gift. Because without that gift, you can certainly use what's called language line, but parents are less apt to communicate with you because it isn't personalized. And when you have a parent liaison, they really are, they're woven into the community, and there's a trust that's created, and there's an improved communication because of that trust.
Yeah, and my concern wasn't with what you were just saying. It was really, as long as the communication aspect of it is clear
Yeah.
and that all of our students can benefit from it. I didn't know how deeply you dug into that, because I know depending on where you're from, if it's Chinese, there's several different dialects of Chinese that have different characters, different tonal parts, and Spanish is not Chinese, but there are different dialects that I know some people aren't able to discern what someone from Puerto Rico is saying versus what someone from Peru is saying.
We've not had that issue yet, and we certainly have families from, I think, every region you've
That's great.
described at that point, and we have not had any barriers to communication so far.
Supersonic.
So we have, at the division level, we do have occasionally where we have a child who comes in and it's Mandarin Chinese. So we have tutors, or we have translators, rather, on the division list, and we'll reach out to them, solicit them for these special situations.
Sure.
To, serve as a translator. And then they're teaming up with the parent liaison to do just that.
Okay.
So there are multiple ways to network to make sure that we're breaking down these barriers for our kids and their families. And like Tara said, Dr. Wolliver said, it's like the welcome. We were intentional in putting our registrars back and having students register in their home schools. But if a family comes in and they don't know how to navigate the educational system, it's hard for them. And so this person provides that wraparound support, which makes such a difference. It sends such a message. When a child doesn't show up and there's absenteeism, they're making that call home because they've already established that relationship with the child. And so it's a win-win for everyone.
谢谢.
Look at that cultural appropriation.
Think any other questions for us? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, thank you so much for those questions, and thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate it. So as we mentioned, we have one item that we are recommending to go to the full board for approval, and it is the movement of 1.372.353, which represents the additional state dollars for at-risk programs, and then returning $720,647 back to the Board of Supervisors.
Say those amounts one more time, because I have to make a motion on this.
So it's right there on your screen at the
Right
bottom there.
Thank you.
Before we-
Oh,
Sorry.
Go-
Just want to, before we do that, there's a few things I wanted to foot stomp just to make
Absolutely.
sure that it's crystal clear. So going back to the internal audit results, just for the folks that are watching, I want to make it very abundantly clear that the firm that was contracted to, or I should say RFP'd to do that audit, that was done at the Frederick County level, at the Board of Supervisors level, at the county office level. They did the RFP to acquire that agency to come in and audit us. So we did not go to our best friend and say, hey, come and audit us and give us a good response. No, that was completely independent. It was done by the county, and then they were sent over to the school board to audit us. Did I articulate that well, Ms. Camry? Excellent. So just really want to foot stomp that for people who are watching. Another thing I want to foot stomp on is when it comes to these numbers that you're seeing here on the screen, the 1,372,353 and then the 720,647. That is a result of the $2.1 million that came from the state. Now, many of you might be wondering, why didn't we incorporate this into our operating budget cycle? Well, I'm going to point fingers at Richmond and blame them. They were late getting us that 2.1 million. Had they been on time, those funds would have been incorporated into our operating budget. However, being as it may, we got those funds late. So that $2.1 million have special strings tied to them, which are the positions that these lovely ladies got up and spoke to us about today. And those are at the behest of what Dr. Hummer sees as a need in his school district. That being said, we went back and looked at the operating budget, and we were able to glean to basically swap funds. So we swapped $1,372,353 of those state funds into our operating budget, leaving us with $720,647, which we are giving back to the county as a good faith. Hey, we have extra money. We are giving it back to you. Thank you. How'd I do?
You did fantastic, Madam Chair, but I would say to edit that slightly is we put 2.1 into our budget.
Into, okay.
Right, and then we identified 720,000 in our current budget that now we're giving back, and then the 1.3 is going to be used towards additional positions that we would like to add on.
Got it, okay.
So you were close with that one little piece. Fantastic.
Big thing I want
Great
to
work.
foot stomp, though, is we are giving back to the county $720,647. Thank you.
That's a good foot stomp.
Fantastic. Okay.
And I would further stomp and say, it's a good musical too. I would further stomp and say that we can't just put that $720,647 anywhere. That has strings attached, and I hope people who are watching and people who end up watching understand that, you know, we're asking for a fourth high school, and yet we're giving back money. That this money has ties that we must follow per the state. And so what we can do is use those for the at-risk positions that were mentioned, and then those funds left over we can give back to the county. So it's not like we're giving away money that we sorely need for CAP programs and what have you. It's money that we want to give back to the taxpayers so that they can do other things for other services like fire, police, and EMTs and so forth. So at that point, at that, I would like, Madam Chairwoman, I would like to make a motion that we move to the full board the appropriation of, move to the full board and request to the Board of Supervisors for a supplemental appropriation for $1.372353 million, which represents additional state dollars for at-risk programs, and accept a return of $720,647 of local dollars back to the Board of Supervisors.
Second. All right, we have a motion that's been put forward and properly seconded. All in favor, reply by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. All right.
See how easy that is?
Seeing no other business, any comments? None? Okay. Seeing no other business on the agenda, what do you think about making a motion to adjourn?
Madam Chairwoman, I would like to make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. We adjourn at 5:26 p.m.